Hello, Romantics. I'm Sarah Gomez, author, romance lover, and host. You're listening to Romancing the Story, a podcast centered around writing, reading, and story structure, all with a twist of romance.
We're at episode 45, and on today's episode, I chat with romance author Lark Green about her debut book, The Orc Boss. We discuss what her writing process looked like while working as a nurse, how she carved out time, recorded ideas, and managed to write, edit, and self-publish her book in a year. Links to connect to Lark and her book, along with other book recommendations provided in the episode, will be listed in the description. I do use Amazon affiliate links, so if you buy through the link, it helps the podcast and is always appreciated. It's that time of year again, and love is in the air. If you want to get all snuggly and cute, definitely check out Amafire Press Apparel. They are an online apparel shop creating shirts and mugs designed with readers and writers in mind. Owned by a woman and a fellow romance writer, Amafire Press has a design that expresses your personality, whether you want to chill for nighttime reading or gear up for a writing challenge. Best of all, they're adding new designs almost every week. The special discount code of WELCOME15 for your first order for 15% off is still available. I will include links and the code in the description. With that said, let's jump right in. Welcome debut romance author, Lark Green. Yay!
Hey, what's up?
So in case listeners don't know, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your writing?
Yeah, so my name is Lark. I've been a nurse for about 5 years. I've been working in healthcare a total of 7 years. So I work as a nurse during the day, and I actually write monster romance at night. I know, so saucy. So right now I live in Arizona. I live in the desert with my husband. We are very isolated. We actually live on a Native American reservation with our 3 spoiled dogs. And living in the middle of nowhere, it sucks, but it also, has its advantages, which is like I have all this time to read and write. I don't have a lot of distractions. I started writing. So my writing journey, it began around high school. I was very interested in writing and reading. I got, with a lot of people, I got really busy during college and I stopped. When the pandemic first hit, that's when I started writing again, actually, when I had COVID for the first time and I was quarantined in my room and I had nothing else to do. I actually started writing fanfic just for fun. And then it slowly progressed. A couple years later, when I was about to turn 29, I was having a career crisis where I had kind of fallen out of love with nursing. And, I didn't know what I wanted to do. That's never fun when you're like the year before you're about to turn 30, So I was like, you know what? I want to write a book and I want to have it done before I turn 30. And so, yeah, that's kind of where it started. And I'm 30 now and I've finished my first book and I've edited it and it's coming out just, today when the podcast is coming out.
Well, what a great time to kick off, your debut into the writing world is like monster romance. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. Sure. Why not?
That's awesome. And I love that you set a goal. You had a goal in mind for that. Like you knew by the time you were 30, you were like, okay, I'm going to have my book released around that time, right? So what kind of led you specifically to go into the romance genre and even more so into the monster romance?
Yeah, I know. It's a big jump. And honestly, that's a question I ask myself a lot because I haven't been reading romance very long. I kick myself a lot because I love romance so much, especially monster romance. And I feel so bad that I found it much later in life because in high school, I was the type of person where I was forcing myself to read the American classics because I thought it would make me a better writer for whatever reason. And then, I started writing and everything. And I thought my first book was going to be like a psychological thriller. And then I know. And then I was talking to my friend that I had met in the fanfic space, and she was telling me about these alien barbarian books she was reading, you know, Ruby Dixon stuff. And at the time too, I was like, huh, that's kind of weird. That's not for me. And then I picked up one of Ruby's books just on a whim, just to kind of read it as a joke. And I like fell absolutely in love with it. So I didn't like go to romance and then monster romance. I like jumped romance and went straight deep into the monster romance realm. And I've been here ever since.
Well, I'm so glad that you did, because then you wrote a monster romance to
Yeah.
go along with it, because that's exciting. And like I feel like everyone did that around the time of the pandemic for a lot of reasons. I feel like people kind of fell into romance because it was kind of, there was some kind of comfort. I love that you
Definitely.
mentioned too that you wrote fanfic kind of in the
Mhm.
beginning of that, because that for me that is such a comfort. Sometimes I'll just write a short fanfic story.
I think that's like how a lot of people get started, and I felt, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but like I felt ashamed of it at first. Like it took me a couple weeks to tell my husband like, "Hey, I've been writing fanfic. Like hopefully you can still love me." And of course, it wasn't a big deal. And I think that's how a lot of people get started with writing. And so yeah, it's totally normal.
And as we referenced, you just released your debut romance, The Orc Boss,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, congrats. That's amazing. Now I know you wrote the book you mentioned while working full time as a
Mhm.
nurse,
Yeah.
which is a demanding job in and of itself. How are you able to manage both a day job and writing?
So I've worked, you know, up until just recently, I had worked as a bedside nurse. And yeah, it is a physically and emotionally draining job, especially during the pandemic. I worked in a very, my last bedside job, I was working at a very small hospital. We didn't have a lot of resources. And it just felt like I was being pulled in every different direction. And that's when I kind of hit a wall and was having my career crisis where I thought like I needed a big change. So I was working as a contract nurse for them. So I was only with them for a year. Once my contract ended, I started looking for remote jobs with like telehealth. And luckily, I was able to find one. And I thought, oh my gosh, perfect. I'm going to have so much energy. I'm going to be able to not only write my first book, but to write like two more books. And, you know, that actually wasn't the case. Like, I didn't realize, even though I wasn't physically exhausted at the end of the day, I was still, you know, it's hard to look at your computer all day and then turn around and like look at your other computer and try to write and edit your story. It took a lot of deciding where to put my energy. You know, obviously work is a priority. I really aspire to be like a morning person who writes in the morning and then goes to work and, you know, then has the evening off to just watch TV and, you know, be lazy. But I know myself, I'm not a good morning person. So I had to focus a lot of my energy on the weekends. And that meant making writing a priority. You know, I'm the type of person where I will look for any reason not to do any housework. And so I would get up in the mornings, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate with that. You know, my weekends was like my writing time and my editing time. And even though I'm a nurse and, you know, my remote job could be pretty demanding, I'm very lucky. You know, I don't have any kids. My husband, he works nights. He works healthcare too, so he works nights. And so, you know, I didn't really have to deal with him until like he woke up in the afternoons. So I would just focus my energy on the weekends. And then the other thing that really helped me was having a really good group of friends, and then also having my husband help me. So, you know, I would meet with my critique group like every couple of weeks. And so I knew I'd have to have like a new chapter for them before we met. And then my husband, too, even though he doesn't read romance, I would say, okay, I got to freaking get this chapter done. I need you to bug me about it. So that's kind of like how I got there.
Well, and I love that you bring up like two very important points. I think new authors may not consider or realize until they kind of get into it. Like you were mentioning, that balancing a day job and writing can be very draining, right? Like you
Mhm.
trying to switch those modes, especially if you're doing something very kind of analytical in and of itself, and then kind of shifting gears to be more creative can be
Mhm.
really, really hard to kind of switch one mode on and off and then try to have the energy to do it, to do something brand new again, to put work
Yeah.
into it. And then the accountability partners. I think those are
Mhm.
so important to success for any author, and those are always like two big pieces. I feel like even when I was starting to write, I was just like, I'm so drained.
I
I
know it's
can't
so hard.
hardly. Yes. So when you were going into it, like as a new author, when you were kind of starting your writing, did you have any kind of like, did you plot anything beforehand? Did you kind of plan anything out with how you were structuring your time with your weekends or your weekdays?
Yeah, I'm a big planner. I'm a big promoter of like being a planner. I know everyone has a different process. Planning really helps me. So I would outline my story. And I actually followed the what's it called? Romancing the Beat by Gwen Hayes,
Hmm.
and then Save the Cat Beat Sheet, by Blake Schneider. I mostly used Romancing the Beat, especially because I was writing a romance book. So I plotted, all my beats and everything, and I got all that covered. And then, as I was writing, I was very open to inspiration. So if I was writing something and it felt like it was going a different way, I wouldn't like fight against it. I would just go with the flow. There were also times where, my critique partners would give me advice or they would have suggestions, and I'd be very open to that. And I did have to change a lot of scenes, and that was okay. Especially because like with my first draft, like I got it done really fast. I actually finished my first draft within a month. I know. I can write really fast. It's just the editing that takes me forever. And I think it is because I would plot out. I kind of knew I would sit down and I would know exactly what I was going to write. I would have my plots, but then I would think about the scene that I was going to write, and I would even think about it or like let the movie play in my head and just kind of go in trance and just like type it all out.
Well, and also when you were kind of thinking about like planning all of this out or working through it, when you said you get your first draft in a month, which is awesome. Like very few people I know could do that. I've never been able to do that. But did you just give yourself permission to write? Or did you, because I get stuck in an
Yes.
editing hole. That's where, oh, okay. See, I get stuck in an
Yes.
editing hole. That's where I get
I
stuck.
I think that's the biggest roadblock, like writers. I mean, I say this like I know, but I am a new writer, so just take my word with a grain of salt. But yeah, I think that's the biggest roadblock a lot of writers hit. One caveat that I forgot to mention, because I don't want people to listen to this and be like, "Oh my gosh, like I can't write a draft in a first month. That's ridiculous." I wrote that first draft when I was between jobs. So that's the only way I was able to write it so quickly. I knew I was going to be transitioning to a new job soon. So I think that's kind of what put the fire under my bum to get it done really fast.
Well, and I think that's a very underutilized or not thought about because people are like, I don't want to give myself a deadline. But, giving yourself a deadline isn't a
It
bad thing.
helps.
Oh,
It
it does.
helps.
It really does because I'm the
Yeah.
kind of person, if it's out there forever, like I can do it when I get time to it, I'll never have time for it. And I'll just
Right.
let it go forever. So, and I feel like a lot of authors do that. So, when you got from beginning to end, I'm kind of curious, how long did it take you? Because you got the first draft in a month. Like, how long did the editing process take?
I can tell you because I'm the type of person where I recorded exactly like how much word count I had per day and like when I started, when I
Nice.
finished. So I'm going to tell you the exact days. Okay, so I started this book December 13th, 2021, and then I completed my edit. Okay, so I started it then. I finished the first draft January 18th, 2022, and then I finished the editing of the Orc Boss on 10/29, 2022. That's the timeline I had.
Well, then in kind of basically less than a year, you kind of had
Uh,
from beginning to end, from the written to the very final the final product.
and really, it's because I work and I have no life. I need to add that caveat because I know people, everyone has responsibilities and kids. I live in the middle of nowhere in the desert. I don't have a lot of distractions.
Well, and like you said, though, you prioritized your writing. They always
Mhm.
tell you that if you want to be a writer, you got to prioritize your writing.
Yeah.
So you said you used the weekends a lot. You utilized the weekends quite a bit, and you understand you're not a morning person, right? Is what
Yeah.
you kind of mentioned. So, like, did you use any other specific methods? Because I think those are important to know when you're trying to say, okay, I need to find these little pockets of time to
Mhm.
write.
Well, and you had mentioned earlier too, because I wanted to add on that with giving yourself permission to write. With that, yes, I had to. I think my biggest roadblock that I have experienced is I could not turn off the editor side of my brain. I didn't understand, like, writing is editing, and so of course your first draft is going to be bad. So the first step was I mentally had to tell myself, like, I not only give you permission for this first draft to be bad, but like I want it to be bad because that means it's only going to get better. And I know that sounds kind of hokey and corny, but it really did help me. It was kind of hard to kind of get over that feeling and just turn off that editor side of my brain. But once I did, I was able to kind of just let loose and just let the words flow. Talking about other methods that kind of helped me create an environment that didn't allow for any distractions. So I would, make sure my dogs were taken care of. I would put my phone away. I downloaded apps on my computer where it makes it so you can't like access like the internet or anything. I'd put a timer on my computer. And then I would just like, I would challenge myself. I'm a big believer of like having mini sprints with yourself and challenging myself in that way. So I would say, okay, so I can write an average about like 3,000 words per hour. Let me see if I can do a little bit better. And I would have like 30-minute sprints, and then I would take a break, and then 30-minute sprints. And then once I kind of hit that goal for the day, I would let myself have a break. Because I think, when your focus is writing, it's really easy to let it consume you. And I think like with work, you need healthy boundaries or you're going to start to like resent it. And so, once you kind of hit that quota, and that quota can look different for everyone. I mean, if you're like a busy mom and you can only spare 30 minutes, like, you know, write your 30 minutes and then put it out of your head and just, go on with your day. And then try a little bit better the next day, try to get your word count up the next day. I think that's really what helped me get my first draft done so fast.
Well, and that is such a great tool to use. A method you had mentioned was kind of challenging yourself,
Mhm.
because that's something that I find we do actually whenever I go on retreats with my writing girlfriends. Is
Yeah.
like we will kind of set like a goal. Let's say like, okay, we're gonna do a writing sprint for like 10 minutes, write as much as you can. And
Mhm.
I love those little challenges. And something I actually just recently talked to Catherine McClatchy, who's been on the podcast before. We talked
Mhm.
about setting goals for yourself. And like sometimes those are very easily achievable goals so that you can go beyond that. Like, because a
Yeah.
lot of times I think too, we set goals for ourselves of like something crazy, like I want to get, I feel like a year was like great, or anywhere from a year to a little less was perfect for like getting it a book written and getting it like finished, right, to the final
Mhm.
product. Sometimes I think we set ourselves up by saying like, I'm going to do it in like 3 months. And it's just like, ooh, that's going to be fast.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just not possible.
So I'm glad it sounded like you set yourself like achievable goals too within those time frames. Were you able to track them kind of
Right.
successfully, right?
Yeah, I did. And I think I was kind of hard on myself. Um and I would talk to like my critique friends, and it helped too because I was meeting with them pretty regularly. We would even we all live in different states, and so we would meet like over Zoom and have sprints with each other. So I think having that community really helps. I mean, I had the big goal where, the very open-ended goal where I was like, I'm gonna write a book before I'm 30. Getting the first draft done, I want to write about 4,000, 5,000 words per day. It at least put me at like having it done within a month. The editing part was the hardest for me, because I thought I could get the editing done super, super fast. That was not the
Mm.
case. So I had to kind of have a moment where I realized, like, okay, I'm not going to get a chapter edited once a day. once a week is good. Once a week is really, really good. And it ended up being once a week to every 2 weeks. And that was okay. And so that's kind of the guideline like I went by. Like I would get down on myself like, oh, I thought I was going to have this done a lot faster, but looking at it now, I realized like, holy crap, I wrote and edited this book like in under a year. That's pretty amazing, especially for a first time book.
Oh, yeah. Because it does. It can take a long time, especially if you just give yourself permission to write. Like you said, sometimes you're just like, I'm not sure where this sentence makes sense, but I'm going to try to untangle it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I know if I showed you my first draft, you would LOL so hard. It is so silly. And like, that's okay. Cause I've heard before, like the first draft, you're just telling yourself the story. And even though I had a hard time with the editing, I'm just not a very good editor. But having that foundation of like the bare bones, like I was able to kind of like spit it out a lot easier and like edit it and kind of clear up the page of what I was trying to say.
You mentioned yourself, you're not really an editor. Did you kind of lean on your accountability girlfriends
Oh,
or your partners or your friends?
yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. I tell them like, they say like, oh no, you wrote the book, but like they had a major, major part in it. And I'm very lucky. I don't know how this worked out, but this little critique group I found, like they're very, very good writers. They kind of became like my writing mentors, but they're very, very good editors. And so they did a lot for the book.
I can never give enough props to like writing partners, critique partners, beta readers, like all of those, because they help you kind of push you along, right? To make you better, to make your writing better and help improve it. Little shifting gears a little bit. So when you were working both as a nurse and in telehealth, I'm sure, like we talked about, that can be very stressful and draining. Is your book, is it more of a dark romance or is it kind of more lighthearted? Is it somewhere in the middle? Because I imagine going from very stressful, draining to maybe even writing, depending on where you sit on the spectrum of light versus dark, of the thing, it could be a very hard place to kind of go from one end to the other.
I thought it was a little bit dark, but I've been getting reviews and I've had a lot of reviews say like, oh no, this is like very light mafia. This is very like, it's not as dark as I was thinking, which I'm glad because I feel like there can be some heavy themes and like with why I read, it's a form of escapism. So I wanted it to be interesting. I wanted there to be plot, but I didn't want it to be so draining that you feel like you need a break from the book. And it's interesting too, because when I first started my writing journey, I was like, okay, I'm going to write a medical thriller. And I may still write that. That's still kind of in the back of my mind. But it was hard because I'd work at the hospital all day and then I'd go home and try to write about this, person working in the hospital. And I was like, I cannot do this. So I think even though, my book is mafia and everything, it was a good break from my world.
No, that's a great point because it is kind of writing is, I think, just like reading is an escapism for a lot of writers. And it's very true. Sometimes they say, write what you know, but at the same time, it's like, but what's the fun in that? I already know this stuff. I kind of want to write about something else.
Right. There's definitely pros and cons. Like, if there was wound care, there is like a scene in my book where, the heroine has to like patch up the hero's like stab wound. And I was like, all right, I got this. That part was really fun to write.
Well, and I'm sure because my Nana was a nurse and my husband worked as an EMT. So I know you have stories.
Right.
And like, you might want to put those in the book for later. Cause I know he's told me stories and I'm just like, I'm saving that for later. I'm going to put that in there somewhere.
No, for sure. No, I know I've had like a few interesting stories in my career. My husband right now, he actually works in the ER. And so whenever he's telling me about these like wild, wild stories, I'm like listening really close and like, all right, I may put that in a book later.
And so it's always been very interesting. And sometimes he'll just throw out that knowledge somewhere. So I just tuck it in the back of my head. Like, yeah, I'll use that for later somehow. you did put like methods in place, like for
Mhm.
like word counts, you put apps on your computer, which love that idea for like keep you on track. So you don't go down
Mhm.
rabbit holes of the internet, which I do.
Yeah.
Oof,
Yeah.
just so bad. Did you build in like some kind of buffer or downtime to actually do research for things you might not know about? Or you're like, put an asterisk by that. I know that's not right, but I'm going to figure that out later on Google.
I mean, I am the type of person, I don't like doing research. I'm very lazy when it comes to that. I'm like, if it takes me more than 5 seconds, like I'm just gonna, I don't know, figure it out, make it up.
Mm.
I'm just kidding. But I think like with my first draft, I really tried to focus and just write. So if there was something that came up I needed to research later, I had a separate document. So I would like write that down. Make sure to like look this up later. And it was kind of hard too because it's a fantasy world. Um, Dealing with the mafia, I had a hard time like trying to find where to do that research. Like I watched like some mafia shows and stuff like that. But I kind of had to make it up as I go. But yeah, just having that separate document, I just had to make sure like nothing stopped my flow. Or even if I had like a new scene idea or like I wanted to add something to the scene, I would just put that on the separate document. And then when I would go back and do my second edit through, I'd be like, okay, you got to make sure to add these beats.
Well, and I mean, that's very fair. Like, luckily, because of monster romance, we can kind of make up rules about the mafia.
Yes.
Probably. I like that you had a separate document because that's a great that's a great way to kind of keep track of what else might where you need to tighten things up. Like just
Mhm.
like put a bow on it and just be like, okay, I just need to make sure that this is okay before I finish this draft. Did you also build in time for like recharging? Like when you didn't feel like writing?
There were plenty of times when I was just like so sick of my story and I just wanted to be done with it. So I would just say like, okay, I'm going to take like a week off and then come back to this with fresh eyes. And that usually helped. I complained a lot to my critique writers and they were very encouraging. Like, no, this is good. Like, it's not as bad as you think it is. And I think, we're our own worst critics. I was really, really hard on myself. And so you just either have to push through that bad feeling, or even it's okay to like take a break from your stuff and then come back with new eyes. And I think that really does help you see it from a different perspective. And, for me, I was like, okay, this isn't as bad as I'm thinking. I'm going to keep going with this. I mean, I'm already this far, might as well finish it.
Did you time those times? You're saying, okay, I'm going to give myself like 2 days away from it, or did it kind of just happen organically?
It kind of just happened organically. With the first draft, I got it done so fast. I didn't have any time to second guess myself. And then, when I was going through the second draft, I did have those times a lot. And I didn't really say like, okay, I'm going to give myself 3 days off. I would just kind of go with the flow. Yeah, I'd usually end up giving myself about a week. Another thing I did that kind of helped me even after the first draft was done is I would listen to like the audiobook of Romancing the Beat. And that kind of helped me give me new ideas, like new insights that helped me, or even just like reading other stories and listening to other stories really kind of helped inspire me.
Well, and you bring up a great point because that's something I feel like I do if I need to recharge or I need to step away for a little bit, either from the podcast or just writing in general. I'll be like, I'm going to go read. And I usually like to read something
Yeah.
in the genre I'm writing, just because that to me just inspires me or makes me feel like, all right, I want to go back to my stuff. Did you feel like you were reading more romance while you were writing? And were you reading more monster romance in particular?
Yeah, I jumped a lot between. I think up until that point, I had mostly read monster romance, but at that point, I'd actually started reading like contemporary romance. I'd read a little bit of mafia romance, and I tried to focus, on mafia romance just to kind of see, like learn from other books, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very much a mood reader, and I didn't let that stop. Like I just kind of read what I wanted to read. And I've listened to, other authors and other podcasts where they say like read anything and everything. And so I really like leaned into that. Like I would listen to like autobiographies. If I wanted to listen to like a thriller, I would. And I've listened to a lot of audiobooks. I do have a hard time like sitting down and like reading a book sometimes. And so I do listen to a lot of audiobooks, and those really help me. And like surprisingly, I was able to be inspired by like non-romance books. Like it just hits you at weird times. Like I remember I worked at like a COVID clinic where we'd have like a COVID drive-through. And this was before I was working on my story, when I was mostly just working on fanfic. But I'd like get inspired in the middle of like the COVID drive-through. And so I'd like whip out my phone and like write down some notes and everything. This is when I was like sitting on the side, and like I had, I didn't have my PPE on or anything, it was sanitary. I wasn't bringing COVID home on my phone, but yeah, it's just, it always hits at weird moments. And so I'd kind of just like be open to that.
Well, and that kind of goes along with what you were saying. Like if you're a busy mom and if you only have like 30 minutes, like maybe you do find those little pockets of time in between, like you can write those 30 minutes, but like if you're making dinner and, the kids are distracted, hopefully by like a TV show or something like that, or
Right.
they're playing in their playroom or anything like that, you can, if you're inspired, you break out your phone and like you just write it down, jot it down real quick.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's hard because there are two kind of conflicting ideas where, you kind of have to be disciplined and like sit yourself down and write for the 30 minutes, even if you're not motivated. And 90% of the time, you're not going to be motivated. And you have to, that's the hardest part, is you have to push through that feeling and just do it anyways. But yeah, and then being open to the inspiration and jotting down the ideas when they do come, even though you're super, super busy. That's kind of what would happen with me, is I would be stuck on a scene and thinking like, I don't know how to, like, this dialogue is supposed to go or how to make it better. And then, it would just hit me at like random times. Always the most inconvenient times, as you probably know, is when it would hit you. So you just have to be ready to open and ready to receive it.
Yeah. And that's great. And then also like writing it down. Like I know friends who will carry like little notebooks with them just because they've written several books and they say it just happens. And when it does, I got to write it down or it's gone. If I have to, it goes in my phone. And sometimes it goes in a text to my husband, and my husband's like, I have no clue what this means. And I'm like, it's not for you. That's for me.
You're like, don't worry about it.
I know. Yeah. Don't even think about it. It's nothing for you to worry about. And this is a problem I get into with my writing as well, especially going like having a full-time job and still trying to be a writer, is sometimes I will focus on a project. We were talking about focusing, like maybe on like just writing. I try to focus on a book, but then I get like, there's an idea over here, right, of like another book. And so I want to go sidetracked. So did you focus on the one book, the Orc Boss, or did you kind of have others in different stages of writing, or do you just jot them down as a research thing and or in a document and say like, okay, that's for the next book or my next one I want to do?
Yeah. My biggest advice is like, don't listen to that voice. Like tell that voice to shut up. Because that's like the biggest pitfall is, we're working on the stories. It's really fun at the beginning. It's really exciting. We quickly fall out of love with it because it's so hard. And that's normal. And a lot of people will jump to different projects and then they don't get anything done. So you just have to tell that other voice to shut up until you get this one done. So it was funny because I started this book and I was like, this is just going to be like a one-off book. I'm not going to do like any second books with it. But like halfway through, I was like, oh, no. These like side characters are pretty fun. There's like a really grumpy elf who works for the Orc Boss. So he, as I was writing him, I was like, okay, he deserves his own love story. And so that eventually became a motivator for me, where I was like, I got to get this freaking book done so I can work on my second book. So as long as, you use it to help motivate you, that's great. But you have to be very careful not to like jump projects. Even if you're writing a book and you don't think it's going to go anywhere, that's fine. Just finish it at least. And then you can kind of determine whether or not you want to go forward with it or move to another project.
Yeah. And I think that is spot on, because I found that when I focus on one book or like one writing project, I can actually like get it done or get that piece of it I want to get done, as opposed to like the 5 different books I have in any different state of progress at the moment. So, and you said, so now kind of going to be possibly a series? Oh, for
Yeah,
this.
yeah. So
Oh,
I'm working on the second book right now. I think at least maybe like 4 books out of it.
nice.
I know. Yeah, it's crazy. I didn't think it was going to be so big.
So, and these are full length novels, right? Or are they novellas?
So yeah, the Orc Boss, it's a full length novel. I'm
Okay.
guessing the second book I'm working on is going to be a full length. Yeah, knowing
Ooh,
me, and I'm very
nice.
wordy, so yeah, they'll probably be full books.
And I did see, so it is available through Kindle Unlimited,
Hmm.
correct?
Yep, that's
Ooh,
correct. Yep.
awesome. Now, do you think you're going to stay, like, obviously you have the series, possibly now going to go in for monster romance, but do you think you'll stay with monster romance or you might venture out into other subgenres of romance?
I think at least with romance, I'll probably just stay monster romance, maybe write some alien romance books. I don't know, humans are just boring.
I know, right? Once you get into the monster category, it's just like
Yeah,
there's a lot going on here that I really like.
right, right. But I mean, you never know. Like, never say never. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm very open to whatever I should write or like my inspiration, I guess, that I get. But yeah, for right now, I think I'm just gonna stick with monsters and aliens.
There's a question though for the second book. Have you set any goals for that one? Because I know the first one you said before you're 30, and now you
Yeah.
did that. Woo, woo. So, like, and you just celebrated a birthday, didn't you? Way to go, girl.
Oh, thank you.
Congrats. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
the third
The
club
30
30.
Club.
It's amazing. It's amazing here. You're going to love it. Trust me. Did you set goals for the second book?
No, and I've been like
Hmm.
struggling because of it. Um, I had my general like, oh, I'm gonna write this amount of words per day, and I haven't really stayed on track with it. I've been like tracking my time, but I think it's hard with the holidays, and my husband and I, our schedules like allow for like a lot of like travel. Um, so we live in Arizona, we go back and visit our families in Idaho a lot, and especially during the holidays, I got busy. But then again, it's also just like making excuses for myself, because I can find 30 minutes anywhere to write. So I definitely need to set goals for this book to get it done.
I like that you mentioned that because sometimes our lives might change due to a
Yeah.
job, due to like holidays, due to the addition of foster children.
Yes, right.
Things like that. Things like that can really like change your whole life or your schedule. And something a friend of mine actually did was she was like, so we all heard as writers, I think we've all heard that saying of if you want to be a real writer, you got to write 1,000 words a day, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think everyone's heard that at some point.
Yeah.
But one of my friends said, you know what? I've set the bar low for myself to at least get like 300 words a day. If I can get that many, I'm good. And a lot of times she over exceeded that because
Mhm.
she was just like, it was such an easy mark for her to hit. She ended up like getting more, a little bit more. And even on the day she struggled, she's like, all I got to do is get 300 and I'm okay. Like that feels achievable, at least to me.
I think we all can be very hard on ourselves. So like you said, just setting the bar low, like you can only succeed.
Like, because I think that's what happens with a lot of writers, especially like through the writing process. It can be very discouraging because you see like other people, which, comparison is the thief of joy, but
Mhm.
is what they say. And so comparing yourself to someone else, like, oh my gosh, they got it done in like a year, like less than a year. They were able to get their book
Yeah.
fully done, but you went into it with a plan and you were able to achieve that, and that my writing process might look a little different. So, but it is achievable. It's just
Yeah.
everyone's journey looks a little different, and how you structure the methods and the plans are kind of up to you.
Yeah. And yeah, you just have to sit yourself down and be serious and think about like what are the biggest things that are stopping you from doing this. Because I've met, as I've kind of, connected more with people online, I've met so many people who say they have like a work in progress or like they want to be a writer or an author. I think the biggest thing is just like being serious with yourself, knowing your limitations and knowing what you can do. And like you said, not comparing yourself to others.
And I do like that you understood too enough about yourself, because sometimes we have to get real honest with ourselves, which ooh, it hurts. It can really hurt. Like when you said like you weren't a morning person. right? And then you
Mhm.
try to use the weekend, you try to utilize the weekends to get some of that
Right.
writing time done.
Right.
Like, and that's what I find. I find like after we put the boys to bed, after everything, it's more in the evening that I have the time to write,
Mhm.
or if I get up like ungodly in the morning and I
I
don't know
know.
if I
Who
can,
wants to do that?
yeah,
I
it's like,
know.
I was just like, I don't know if I can do that. So,
No, I know. And it's hard in the evenings too, especially if you're working all day, like your brain is just fried. But I think if you just, kind of make it a habit, it'll get easier. And even just kind of giving you some time after work to kind of relax and let your brain reset and then, restart. And I know it's hard when you've got like, kids to have that rest period. But I think even just like taking a break from your computer and then going back to it really helps.
like even
Hmm.
just like walking away and just like going outside just to breathe for a little bit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah. Also, going through a crisis helps.
Too, that
Like I
too.
did. I don't recommend that one.
But
But
it puts
yeah,
a
but
fire under you, right? It kind of
yeah,
got you going.
whatever gets you motivated.
Hey,
I
man,
know,
whatever gets you going.
yeah. But it's, I think of it as like, we all have stories we want to tell and they're all very important and they deserve to be told. So whatever gets you there, you need to do it.
Absolutely. And I love that. I love that like piece of it is that they deserve, we all have stories and they deserve to be told.
Hmm.
It's such a great takeaway. So we have talked all about this incredible like monster mafia romance book of yours, which is available now. So
Hmm.
where can listeners find your book and how can they connect with you?
So it'll be on Amazon, but also be on Kindle Unlimited. So you'll have access to it there. It's just an ebook form right now, but I do have plans really soon to kind of have a physical copy as well. So stay tuned for that. I the best way to connect with me and to learn about like my projects and what's going on is through Instagram. My handle is at author Lark Green. I also recommend you checking out my page, not only because it's my author page, learn about what I have going on, but also I have a meme page. I think I'm pretty funny. There's some people online who also think I'm funny. So if you're just needing a laugh, I recommend you checking it out.
And you have a newsletter, right? So if you want to people want to keep up to date with like
Yeah.
anything you're working on for the second book, right?
So yeah, I do have a newsletter. I also have a website, authorlarkgreen.com. And on there you can subscribe to my newsletter. I promise I won't spam you with a bunch of emails, but I'll just kind of let you know where you can find my stuff and kind of how my projects are going and when they should be released.
Thanks so much to Lark for joining the show. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. That way, you're the first to hear new episodes when they drop. And if you get a chance, feel free to leave a review. It helps support the show and allows more opportunity to bring in all kinds of fantastic guests. There's also a link to the YouTube channel in the description if you'd like to see the interviews with some of the guests and see them show off their lovely books. Book recommendations for this episode: The Orc Boss by Lark Green and Romancing the Beat by Gwen Hayes.
As always, stay safe, be well, and keep writing. Bye!